Rokuro-Kubi. Nearly 500 years ago, there was a samurai named Isogai Ehidazeemon Taketsura in the service of the Lord Kikuji of Kyushu. This Isogai had inherited, from many warlike ancestors, a natural aptitude for military exercises and extraordinary strength. While yet a boy, he had surpassed his teachers in the art of swordsmanship, in archery, and in the use of the spear, and had displayed all the capacities of a daring and skillful soldier. Afterwards, in the time of the Ikkyo War, he so distinguished himself that high honors were bestowed upon him. But when the house of Kikuji came to ruin, Isogai found himself without a master. He might then easily have obtained service under another daimyo, but as he had never sought distinction for his own sake alone, and as his heart remained true to his former lord, he preferred to give up the world. So he cut off his hair and became a traveling priest, taking the Buddhist name of Kwaidan, but always under the koromo of the priest. Kwaidan kept warm within him the heart of the samurai. As in other years he had laughed at peril, so now also he scorned danger. And in all weathers and all seasons, he journeyed to preach the good law in places where no other priest would have dared to go. For that age was an age of violence and disorder, and upon the highways there was no security for the solitary traveler, even if he happened to be a priest. In the course of his first long journey, Kwaidan had occasion to visit the province of Kai. One evening, as he was traveling through the mountains of that province, darkness overcame him in a very lonesome district, leagues away from any village. So he resigned himself to pass the night under the stars, and having found a suitable grassy spot by the roadside, he lay down there and prepared to sleep. He had always welcomed discomfort, and even a bare rock was for him a good bed, when nothing better could be found, and the root of a pine tree an excellent pillow. His body was iron, and he never troubled himself about dews or rain or frost or snow. Scarcely had he lain down when a man came along the road, carrying an axe and a great bundle of chopped wood. This woodcutter halted on seeing Kwaidan lying down, and after a moment of silent observation, said to him in a tone of great surprise, "What kind of a man can you be, good sir, that you dare to lie down alone in such a place as this? There are haunters about here, many of them. Are you not afraid of hairy things?" "My friend," cheerfully answered Kwaidan, "I am only a wandering priest, a cloud and water guest, as folks call it, unsi no ryokaku. 2. And I am not in the least afraid of hairy things, if you mean goblin foxes or goblin badgers or any creatures of that kind. As for lonesome places, I like them. They're suitable for meditation. I am accustomed to sleeping in the open air, and I have learned never to be anxious about my life." "You must be indeed a brave man, Sir Priest," the peasant responded, "to lie down here. This place has a bad name, a very bad name. But, as the proverb has it, kunshi ayayuki ni chikayorazu unsu tez, the superior man does not needlessly expose himself to peril. And I must assure you, sir, that it is very dangerous to sleep here. Therefore, although my house is only a wretched thatched hut, let me beg of you to come home with me at once. In the way of food, I have nothing to offer you, but there is a roof at least, and you can sleep under it without risk." He spoke earnestly, and Kwaidan, liking the kindly tone of the man, accepted this modest offer. The woodcutter guided him along a narrow path, leading up from the main road through mountain forest. It was a rough and dangerous path, sometimes skirting precipices, sometimes offering nothing but a network of slippery roots for the foot to rest upon, sometimes winding over or between masses of jagged rock. But at last, Kwaidan found himself upon a cleared space at the top of a hill, with a full moon shining overhead, and he saw before him a small thatched cottage, cheerfully lighted from within. The woodcutter led him to a shed at the back of the house, whither water had been conducted, through bamboo pipes from some neighboring stream, and the two men washed their feet. Beyond the shed was a vegetable garden and a grove of cedars and bamboos, and beyond the trees appeared the glimmer of a cascade, pouring from some loftier height and swaying in the moonshine like a long white robe. As Kwaidan entered the cottage with his guide, he perceived 4 persons, men and women, warming their hands at a little fire kindled in the RO of the principal apartment. They bowed low to the priest and greeted him in the most respectful manner. Kwaidan wondered that persons so poor and dwelling in such a solitude should be aware of the polite forms of greeting. These are good people, he thought to himself, and they must have been taught by someone well acquainted with the rules of propriety. Then, turning to his host, the Aruji, or housemaster, as the others called him, Kwaidan said, "From the kindness of your speech and from the very polite welcome given me by your household, I imagine that you have not always been a woodcutter. Perhaps you formerly belonged to one of the upper classes." Smiling, the woodcutter answered, "Sir, you are not mistaken. Though now living as you find me, I was once a person of some distinction. My story is the story of a ruined life, ruined by my own fault. I used to be in the service of a daimyo, and my rank in that service was not inconsiderable. But I loved women and wine too well, and under the influence of passion, I acted wickedly. My selfishness brought about the ruin of our house and caused the death of many persons. Retribution followed me, and I long remained a fugitive in the land. Now I often pray that I may be able to make some atonement for the evil which I did, and to re-establish the ancestral home. But I fear that I shall never find any way of so doing. Nevertheless, I try to overcome the karma of my errors by sincere repentance, and by helping, as far as I can, those who are unfortunate." Kwaidan was pleased by this announcement of good resolve, and he said to the Aruji, "My friend, I have had occasion to observe that men, prone to folly in their youth, may in after years become very earnest in right living. In the Holy Sutra, it is written that those strongest in wrongdoing can become, by power of good resolve, the strongest in right doing. I do not doubt that you have a good heart, and I hope that better fortune will come to you. Tonight I shall recite the sutra for your sake, and pray that you may obtain the force to overcome the karma of any past errors." With these assurances, Kwaidan bade the Aruji good night, and his host showed him to a very small side room where a bed had been made ready. Then all went to sleep except the priest, who began to read the sutras by the light of a paper lantern. Until a late hour he continued to read and pray. Then he opened a little window in his little sleeping room to take a last look at the landscape before lying down. The night was beautiful. There was no cloud in the sky. There was no wind, and the strong moonlight threw down sharp black shadows of foliage and glittered on the dews of the garden. Shrillings of crickets and bell insects, 3, made a musical tumult, and the sound of the neighboring cascade deepened with the night. Kwaidan felt thirsty as he listened to the noise of the water, and remembering the bamboo aqueduct at the rear of the house, he thought that he could go there and get a drink without disturbing the sleeping household. Very gently, he pushed apart the sliding screens that separated his room from the main apartment, and he saw, by the light of the lantern, 5 recumbent bodies without heads. For one instant, he stood bewildered, imagining a crime. But in another moment, he perceived that there was no blood, and that the headless necks did not look as if they had been cut. Then he thought to himself, "Either this is an illusion made by goblins, or I have been lured into the dwelling of a Rokuro-Kubi." 4. In the book Soshinki Usper 5, it is written that if one find the body of a Rokuro-Kubi without its head and remove the body to another place, the head will never be able to join itself again to the neck. And the book further says that when the head comes back and finds that its body has been moved, it will strike itself upon the floor 3 times, bounding like a ball. and will pant as in great fear, and presently die. Now, if these be Rokuro-Kubi, they mean me no good, so I shall be justified in following the instructions of the book. He seized the body of the Aruji by the feet, pulled it to the window, and pushed it out. Then he went to the back door, which he found barred, and he surmised that the heads had made their exit through the smoke hole in the roof, which had been left open. Gently unbarring the door, he made his way to the garden and proceeded with all possible caution to the grove beyond it. He heard voices talking in the grove, and he went in the direction of the voices, stealing from shadow to shadow until he reached a good hiding place. Then, from behind a trunk, he caught sight of the heads, all 5 of them, flitting about and chatting as they flitted. They were eating worms and insects which they found on the ground or among the trees. Presently the head of the Aruji stopped eating and said, "Ah, that traveling priest who came tonight. How fat all his body is. When we shall have eaten him, our bellies will be well filled. I was foolish to talk to him as I did. It only set him to reciting the sutras on behalf of my soul. To go near him while he is reciting would be difficult, and we cannot touch him so long as he is praying. But as it is now nearly morning, perhaps he has gone to sleep. Some one of you go to the house and see what the fellow is doing." Another head, the head of a young woman, immediately rose up and flitted to the house, lightly as a bat. After a few minutes it came back and cried out huskily, in a tone of great alarm, "That traveling priest is not in the house. He is gone. But that is not the worst of the matter. He has taken the body of our Aruji, and I do not know where he has put it." At this announcement, the head of the Aruji, distinctly visible in the moonlight, assumed a frightful aspect. Its eyes opened monstrously, its hair stood up bristling, and its teeth gnashed. Then a cry burst from its lips, and weeping tears of rage, it exclaimed, "Since my body has been moved, to rejoin it is not possible. Then I must die. And all through the work of that priest. Before I die, I will get at that priest. I will tear him. I will devour him. And there he is, behind that tree, hiding behind that tree. See him? The fat coward." In the same moment, the head of the Aruji, followed by the other 4 heads, sprang at Kwaidan. But the strong priest had already armed himself by plucking up a young tree, and with that tree he struck the heads as they came, knocking them from him with tremendous blows. 4 of them fled away, but the head of the Aruji, though battered again and again, desperately continued to bound at the priest, and at last caught him by the left sleeve of his robe. Kwaidan, however, as quickly gripped the head by its topknot, and repeatedly struck it. It did not release its hold, but it uttered a long moan, and thereafter ceased to struggle. It was dead, but its teeth still held the sleeve, and for all his great strength, Kwaidan could not force open the jaws. With the head still hanging to his sleeve, he went back to the house, and there caught sight of the other 4 Rokuro-Kubi squatting together, with their bruised and bleeding heads reunited to their bodies. But when they perceived him at the back door, all screamed, "The priest! The priest!" and fled through the other doorway out into the woods. Eastward the sky was brightening. Day was about to dawn, and Kwaidan knew that the power of the goblins was limited to the hours of darkness. He looked at the head clinging to his sleeve, its face all fouled with blood and foam and clay, and he laughed aloud as he thought to himself, "What a miage! The head of a goblin!" After which he gathered together his few belongings and leisurely descended the mountain to continue his journey. Right on he journeyed until he came to Suwa in Shinano. 6. And into the main street of Suwa he solemnly strode, with the head dangling at his elbow. Then woman fainted, and children screamed and ran away. And there was a great crowding and clamoring until the trite, as the police in those days were called, seized the priest and took him to jail. For they supposed the head to be the head of a murdered man who, in the moment of being killed, had caught the murderer's sleeve in his teeth. As for Kwaidan, He only smiled and said nothing when they questioned him. So, after having passed a night in prison, he was brought before the magistrates of the district. Then he was ordered to explain how he, a priest, had been found with the head of a man fastened to his sleeve, and why he had dared thus shamelessly to parade his crime in the sight of people. Quario laughed long and loudly at these questions, and then he said, "Sirs, I did not fasten the head to my sleeve. It fastened itself there, much against my will, and I have not committed any crime, for this is not the head of a man. It is the head of a goblin, and if I caused the death of the goblin, I did not do so by any shedding of blood, but simply by taking the precautions necessary to assure my own safety." And he proceeded to relate the whole of the adventure, bursting into another hearty laugh as he told of his encounter with the 5 heads. But the magistrates did not laugh. They judged him to be a hardened criminal, and his story an insult to their intelligence. Therefore, without further questioning, they decided to order his immediate execution. All of them, except one, a very old man. This aged officer had made no remark during the trial, but after having heard the opinion of his colleagues, he rose up and said, "Let us first examine the head carefully, for this, I think, has not yet been done. If the priest has spoken truth, the head itself should bear witness for him. Bring the head here." So the head, still holding in its teeth the goromo that had been stripped from Quario's shoulders, was put before the judges. The old man turned it round and round, carefully examined it, and discovered, on the nape of its neck, several strange red characters. He called the attention of his colleagues to these, and also bade them observe that the edges of the neck nowhere presented the appearance of having been cut by any weapon. On the contrary, the line of leverance was smooth as the line at which a falling leaf detaches itself from the stem. Then said the elder, "I am quite sure that the priest told us nothing but the truth. This is the head of a Rokuro-Kubi." In the book Nanhoi Butsushi, it is written that certain red characters can always be found upon the nape of the neck of a real Rokuro-Kubi. There are the characters. You can see for yourselves that they have not been painted. Moreover, it is well known that such goblins have been dwelling in the mountains of the province of Kai from very ancient time. "But you, sir," he exclaimed, turning to Quario, "what sort of sturdy priest may you be? Certainly you have given proof of a courage that few priests possess, and you have the air of a soldier rather than a priest. Perhaps you once belonged to the samurai class." "You have guessed rightly, sir," Quario responded. "Before becoming a priest, I long followed the profession of arms, and in those days I never feared man or devil. My name then was Isogai Heidazaemon Taketsura of Kushu. There may be some among you who remember it." At the mention of that name, a murmur of admiration filled the courtroom, for there were many present who remembered it, and Quario immediately found himself among friends instead of judges. Friends anxious to prove their admiration by fraternal kindness. With honor they escorted him to the residence of the daimyo, who welcomed him and feasted him, and made him a handsome present before allowing him to depart. When Quario left Suwa, he was as happy as any priest is permitted to be in this transitory world. As for the head, he took it with him, jocosely insisting that he intended it for a Miyage, and now it only remains to tell what became of the head. A day or two after leaving Suwa, Quario met with a robber, who stopped him in a lonesome place and bade him strip. Quario at once removed his koromo and offered it to the robber, who then first perceived what was hanging to the sleeve. Though brave, the highwayman was startled. He dropped the garment and sprang back. Then he cried out, "You! What kind of a priest are you? Why, you are a worse man than I am. It is true that I have killed people, but I never walked about with anybody's head fastened to my sleeve." "Well, Sir Priest, I suppose we are of the same calling, and I must say that I admire you. Now that head would be of use to me. I could frighten people with it. Will you sell it?" You can have my robe in exchange for your koromo, and I will give you 5 ender score for the head. Quario answered, I shall let you have the head and the robe if you insist, but I must tell you that this is not the head of a man. It is a goblin's head. So, if you buy it and have any trouble in consequence, please to remember that you were not deceived by me. What a nice priest you are, exclaimed the robber. You kill men and jest about it. But I am really in earnest. Here is my robe, and here is the money, and let me have the head. What is the use of joking? Take the thing, said Quario. I was not joking. The only joke, if there be any joke at all, is that you are fool enough to pay good money for a goblin's head. And Quario, loudly laughing, went upon his way. Thus the robber got the head and the koromo, and for some time he played goblin priest upon the highways. But, reaching the neighborhood of Suwa, he there learned the true story of the head, and he then became afraid that the spirit of the Rokuro-Kubi might give him trouble. So he made up his mind to take back the head to the place from which it had come, and to bury it with its body. He found his way to the lonely cottage in the mountains of Kai, but nobody was there, and he could not discover the body. Therefore he buried the head by itself, in the grove behind the cottage, and he had a tombstone set up over the grave, and he caused a Sagaki service to be performed on behalf of the spirit of the Rokuro-Kubi. And that tombstone, known as the Tombstone of the Rokuro-Kubi, may be seen, at least so the Japanese storyteller